Yohanan chapter 18. And it reads, having said these words, Yahushua went out with his taught ones beyond the Kidron torrent. Now, remember that the previous chapter that we read, Yahushua made a prayer. He asked Yahweh for many important things regarding the disciples and those who would believe through their teaching, meaning us, and also prophesied how, just like he revealed the name of the Father to his disciples, then he would have to manifest again in order to reveal it again. And after that prayer, now we have this, and it reads, I repeat, having said these words, Yahushua went out with his taught ones beyond the Kidron torrent, where there was a garden, into which he and his taught ones entered. So we see that the name of that Kidron was means dark. Things were going to get dark, sadly, right? Because Yahushua was going to be caught and then sacrificed. So one of the reasons why this name appears here. So having said these words, Yahushua went out with his taught ones beyond the Kidron torrent, where there was a garden, into which he and his taught ones entered. And Yehuda, right, known as Judas, who delivered him up, also knew the place because Yahushua often met there with his taught ones. Yehuda then, having received the company of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So, as Yahushua is about to note, right, they were coming to get him as if he was a criminal. They were getting him at night while he was always openly teaching during the day. So they didn't want anybody to see what they were doing, which revealed that they knew they were doing something wrong. It revealed that they knew they were not supposed to get him because people would get angry about it. Those who believe in him, of course. Also interesting, the mention of three things here, because remember that the few and the many are represented by the numbers 1 and 3. The many, sadly, until it is the time to get the mark of the beast and they don't receive it, then they will be killed, but they will be justified because they believe in Mashiach, yet they didn't accept the true doctrine until it was late. I mean, late to get saved, but not to be justified, right? So the number 3 represents the many who follow the doctrine of the enemy, the falsehood of the world, the apostasy. And the enemy is represented by a torch, right? Or a lantern, because he is not the light, but he was given a light. And through that light, the idea was to reveal the coming of Mashiach, yet he wanted to get the worship and the honor for himself. So he fell, right? And his name is Halel, which means a luminary, a lantern, pretty much. And like I said, in other prophecies, in other parts of scriptures, we see the torch as a representation of Lucifer. So we also know that one of the names that Halel had before he was called Halel in Isaiah 14, according to other books, was Sabaoth, which means armies. And that has to do with the fact that Yahweh would manifest his anger towards sin through that malach. So the armies, the angels that would execute judgment, would be under his rule. So he was called Sabaoth. And like I said, it's interesting how we have lanterns, torches, and weapons, right? And they were searching for Mashiach to catch him as if he was a criminal, right? They were using weapons when there was no need for them. Obviously, torches and lanterns because they were doing it at night, but showing that they did not have the light. They only had a torch, meaning they were following the false Elohim. And that's why they were using weapons to go after the actual Messiah, right? And led by Yehuda, which is a name that came from Yahuda, right? They changed it not to pronounce Yahoo, but the actual pronunciation would be Yahuda. And that is the tribe through which Mashiach would come. So it's interesting that a person named Yahuda would work with the Pharisees, who were sons of Lucifer, sons of Satan, as Yahushua explained in John 8. And they are using three things that represent the enemy and what he does to go and get Messiah to kill him, right? So all very representative of the fact that Yahushua came to his own and they rejected him. So Yahuda, then having received the company of soldiers, right? So as Sabaoth, as an army, and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees came there with lanterns. Now, Pharisees also has to do with being set apart. Let me see, go to the concordance. The Pharisees, Parash, to make distinct, declare, distinguish, separate, right? And as we know, Lucifer separated a third of the angels from Yahweh, right? During the rebellion, he convinced a third of the angels. And like I said, the Pharisees, even though they got that name to feel distinguished, right? To feel important and to say that they were set apart in the spiritual positive sense. In fact, they were doing it in a negative sense, as Yahushua revealed in John 8. Because if they rejected Yahushua, that meant that they were following a false Elohim, therefore Satan, who tries to take the place of Yahweh. So Yehuda, then having received the company of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Yahushua then, knowing all that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Yahushua of Nazareth." Yahushua of Nazareth. Right. So they answered him, Yahushua of Nazareth. Yahushua said to them, "I am." Right? This, the way it is written here, is important because it shows, right, Yahushua, by saying this, Yahweh is revealing himself through him by saying that he is the only mighty one. This, although he connected, or he could be connected to when Moshe asked for him in Exodus 8, Exodus 15, or 14 through 6, pretty much. Yahweh reveals himself to him. The first thing that Yahweh said is, Eye Asher Yeh, I will be whom I will be. However, that is normally translated as I am who I am, right? So normally, if someone connects this or sees these words right here about Mashiach saying I am, they will connect it to that. However, because of the context, and like I said, because the Eye actually means I will be who I will be. In this case, it would most likely be the word Anoki. And Anoki is the word used by Yahweh on Exodus 20 when he revealed the commandments. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. So it will be Anoki. Still, since it is the first word of the commandments, here we have the Pharisees who think they are fulfilling the law by capturing the Messiah. well, they are fulfilling it, but not in the way they think, right? Uh, and they think they are the heroes. However, they are actually being used by the enemy. So when they said Yahushua of Nazareth, the guarded one, in one interpretation of the word Nazareth, or the branch in another interpretation. However, remember that Yahushua revealed to be the root of David. Still, the word from Netzer has to do with a prophecy in Zechariah. So Yahushua said to them, I am. So he was pretty much saying that he was the manifestation of Yahweh, although obviously in the context we see that he asked them who they were looking for so that he could reveal himself to them because he already knew that they were looking for him. So, and Yahudah, who delivered him up, was also standing with them. When therefore he said to them, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. So you see, this is huge. He said to them, I am. They drew back and fell to the ground. So we see that when he revealed that he is the I am, he is the manifestation of Yahweh in the flesh, that he is Yahushua of Nazareth as well. They fell back, and it seems to be something spiritual, right? Something completely supernatural, although it could be, right? Well, but I find it hard, right, that it would be something completely natural as they got really um frightened or something and um they passed out or something. But it seems to be that their spirits realized what was going on, right? So it had to be something spiritual. Their actual spirits realized who was speaking to them, and they were there to capture him. So it's interesting how, in a way, it was like if the spirit was like, "Yeah, you need to take him, but I don't want to let him go with you." So they drew back and fell to the ground. That is similar, and that brings me back to the commandments. When Yahweh revealed the commandments, it is said and well also interpreted from what is written that every time Yahweh would speak a commandment, the people of Israel would die, and then they would be resurrected. But when they would hear again the next commandment, they would die. Then it came to a point when they said, "Please do not tell us more commandments. We don't want to die." So that is when they said, we don't want to hear that your voice and we don't want to see that fire. So Yahweh said, it is good what they have said. It is tough. So I will send a prophet like you, the prophet like Moshe, who is the vessel in which the voice of Yahweh and the consuming fire would be. So um, when Yahweh would say the commandments, which started with the word Anoki, which is I am, they fell back to the ground from the power that was being revealed there. So when Yahushua says, I am Anoki, as in the commandments, they fall back. That shows who he is. They drew back and fell to the ground. Once more, he asked them, whom do you seek? And they said, Yahushua of Nazareth. So it seems as if their memory was wiped out, like they didn't remember that this just happened, right? That they went back and fell. They get up. Yahushua asks again, who are you seeking? And they said, Yahushua of Nazareth. Yahushua answered, I said to you that I am. If then you seek me, allow these to go. So also remember that the book of John is written according to the interpretation Sod, which is mystery, right? Is the deepest interpretation or the highest, however you want to see it. So by John saying this in his book regarding the fact that they drew back and fell to the ground. Remember that basically in the scriptures, well, we read that the body was made from the dust, from the ground, and it goes back to the ground, right? Just like dying is represented by falling asleep. So here we have that they drew back and fell to the ground. So in a way, like it seems like they passed out, right, for a moment. They fainted, but it could represent the fact that Yahushua came as the first manifestation of Yahweh, Anoki. Remember that not only Yahweh said, Eye Asher Eye, meaning twice, I will be whom I will be. But even when he says Anoki in the commandments, we have the 10 commandments in the book of Exodus, and we have the 10 commandments again in Deuteronomy. And interestingly enough, there are certain differences, very small differences, but there are some that show two aspects of the commandments, which are written on two tablets, which are from heaven and earth, because there are 4 heavenly or spiritual commandments, and the other 6 are physical or earthly commandments, which represent the first and the last, the 2 manifestations of Yahweh. So Eye Asher Eye or Anoki twice in Exodus and Deuteronomy. So here he says, I am the first manifestation, Yahushua. And they fell to the ground, as in they died, right? Because Yahushua manifested, and then people who were in the generation in which Yahushua manifested all died. And then another generation came, and then another, right? And almost 2,000 years have passed. So once more, he asked them, whom do you seek? As if there was a second manifestation, a second time when this is going to happen. And they said, Yahushua of Nazareth. Yahushua answered, I said to you that I am. As in, I already did, but here it goes again. I am. As in, Yahushua came to give testimony of Yahweh. Now Yahweh comes to give testimony of Yahushua, the fact that he is. If then you seek me, allow these to go. So now that they take the last to be killed, the chosen few are allowed to go. The 144,000 are allowed to go without experiencing death. Is that understood? All right. So that obviously meaning the 7th trumpet. In order that the world, in order that the word might be filled, which he spoke, of those whom you have given me, I have lost none. Then Shimon Kepha, here we go, right? Kev used, well, according to what we see, he was very emotional. So he was many times led by emotions and didn't think that much things through before he acted. So he wanted to defend Yahushua, even though Yahushua had been telling him what was going to happen. He decides to attack. So remember also that when the word Shimon appears, it most of the time, obviously, that is according to context, but pretty much most of the time when the name Shimon appears is to show that he would listen to the enemy through his emotions. I want to make that clear. So by being led by emotions without using his intellect, logic, and other things, then he would be misled and act in a wrong way, even though he thought he was doing the best thing. Of course, I want to make that clear. So Shimon means he who is heard or he who hears. So the stone would be Kepha. So then Shimon Kepha, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Melech. So that's interesting. Remember, like I mentioned, the whole book of John is written in the fourth level of interpretation, so mystery. And just like it literally reveals what Mashiach went through during his life, then in a spiritual way, it reveals what the last will have to go through. That's why there are some big differences between the book of John and the other three books known as Gospels, right? That of Mark, Luke, and Matthew. They also have deeper revelations and interpretations and also prophecies regarding the last through what it literally happened with Mashiach. But John is the one that has the most, and he reveals what the last would go through in a spiritual sense by using what Yahushua went through in the literal sense. So, for instance, Yahushua is the high priest, right? And when he came, in the Torah is written that the high priest should not destroy his clothing. He should not rent his basically uniform, right, of the high priesthood. However, when Caiaphas or Kepha, another similarity there, he wanted to show off by pretty much in appearances, show that he was in distress because of what Yahushua was doing. He decided to rent his clothing, which was prohibited by the Torah. And he represented that the high priest was losing his job, was being rent or destroyed, taken from him, in a way like the veil also was divided in half when Mashiach died, the veil in the temple. So that was because the Levite, mainly that of Kepha, or the way he was leading it, the priesthood of the earth, was just a representation, and it was temporal because it was of the earth, until the priesthood of Melchizedek would manifest through Yahushua, who came as the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So Yahushua came to take the priesthood, and that's why Kepha or Caiaphas destroyed his clothing, breaking the law, showing that it was being taken from him by Mashiach as the true high priest, or the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, the priesthood that is heavenly. Now, in this case, we see a representation of how the kingdom is being taken from the enemy and being given to the last. It is taken from Halel and is going to be given to Mikael, right? The Malach, who is going to become the Melech. Malach is messenger. Mikael is a Malach, and he comes to become a Melech, which is king. So here we have Shimon Kepha. Remember that, as I always mention, Yahushua is represented by Keph, by Peter, just like the second manifestation is represented by Paul, Shaul, right? So Kepha, which means stone, represents the cornerstone. Shimon, he who is heard, also connects with Yahushua because he is our intercessor. So he is heard by Yahweh. So that's why we pray in his name, so that Yahweh may hear us. So this is, and I repeat, in the spiritual way. Then Shimon Kepha as Yahushua having a sword, which is the spirit, right? The word of Yahweh is the sword of the spirit, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, right? The representative of the high priest, the one whom the high priest sent. And remember that the high priest would anoint the king, just like Shemuel anointed David. Shemuel means his name is mighty, also him who is heard by the mighty one. So that is connected with Shimon. he who is hurt. And his name is mighty because his name is the only one given to men so that they can be saved. So the high priest servant, also another thing I wanted to say regarding this. Yeah, Shemuel, like I mentioned, was the one who anointed David. So Yahushua came as Shemuel, whose name is mighty, who is heard by the mighty one because he is the intercessor, so that he would give the oil, the Ruach HaKodesh, in order to anoint the last, who comes as the prince in order to become the king or Melech. So we see that Shimon Kef, as if it was Yahushua having a sword, the word of Yahweh, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Melech. So the name of the servant was King Melech. So it is as if he cut off the ear of the Malach who became the king of the world, the Elohim of this world. Because now the last would take that place, that Malach, Mikael, as Melech. Also, the fact that it is the right ear, well, there are several things we could say. One is that since they were not able to hear the word of Yahweh that Yahushua came to reveal, then Kefa cuts the ear. As not that he did it on purpose to represent that, but it happened so that it would represent the fact that they weren't able to hear. They had ears but couldn't hear. Right? As when Yahushua said, he who has ear, let him hear. Now, those who don't hear don't need their ears. So cut off his right ear. Also, the right ear represents the right way to hear, right? When you hear things right or and understand what you hear. But since they didn't understand anything that Yahushua would say, the parables, nor the fact that he is the Messiah, then they only heard with the left ear, representing that they only misunderstood what they heard. Also, servants, meaning slaves, when they wanted to be slaves forever, they would get a mark on their right ear. So this is the servant of the high priest, and now he's getting his right ear cut off, which in a way could be seen as that because he is a servant of the enemy, he got his understanding cut off. Or if we were to see it in a positive way, although I don't think that one really fits because of what is coming, it would be like being freed from that mark that made him be a slave to the high priest. So obviously, when it comes to the literal and the historical, when Kepha did this, now he was guilty of a crime that would cost him his life. So when Kepha said that he was willing to go and die with Mashiach, it almost fulfills. And if it happened, it would be in a way for something that he did do, right? And also, it was not the time for him to die because Yahweh needed him to teach about Mashiach to the Yahudim. So, continuing after all that I have said, then Shimon Kepha, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear, and the servant's name was Melech. Then Yahushua said to Kepha, put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my father has given me? Right? So Yahushua stops him. Yahushua, as we see in other of the writings of disciples, had told them to bring a sword. Why? Because a prophecy needed to be fulfilled. Not for this to happen, but for the prophecy from Zechariah to be fulfilled, right? Because they were going to accuse them of being evildoers. So the fact of having a sword of or two would make them believe that, or have an excuse to say it and think that was the case. So that's the reason why there was a sword. Now, I would think that Yahushua knew this was going to happen, right? Perhaps because he knows all things. And if so, then it was so that we would understand everything that we just talked about, right? Uh, what Yahweh revealed through that action from Peter. However, when Yahushua told him to bring a sword, he didn't tell him so that you can attack somebody if something happens. No, he told him so that the prophecies may be fulfilled regarding that I mentioned, right? As if there were evildoers. So, put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my father has given me? So we see here how, once again, the cup represents having to go through death. So he is willing to drink it. Later on, he's going to feel otherwise because of emotions and being in the flesh, but still he's willing to fulfill the will of Yahweh before his own, which is why he is who he is and fulfilled what he fulfilled by dying for our sins. So shall I not drink the cup which my father has given me? Then the company, and right, obviously by saying that to Peter, he was telling him, do you think that I'm going to fight doing the will of Yahweh? Do you think that I don't want to fulfill his will, which is to die for the sins of the world? Obviously, he didn't want to suffer in the flesh, but he was willing to suffer for us. And I say that he didn't want to because he told Yahweh to please pass the cup. Verse 12. Then the company of soldiers and the commander and the officers of the Yehudim seized Yahushua and bound him. Now, we don't see that here, but in the other, when Kepha did that, Yahushua healed the man, the servant of the high priest, and put the ear back on. So, yeah, somebody had to pick it up, and then he put it back up, right? He made that miracle. So the fact that John doesn't mention it here is because of what I was saying regarding how the kingship is being cut off from the enemy to be given to another one. That's why he was called Melech, the servant. Now, the fact that in the other writings we see that Yahushua actually healed the man, it was to save Peter, because if they would go back and would tell them what Peter did by cutting the ear, then they would kill him too. So Yahushua saved Peter by getting rid of the evidence, right? Because he healed the servant. So now there was no evidence of his ear having been cut off at all, right? And if they said anything, then they were recognizing that he was able to do miracles. So it will be a contradiction and a bunch of other things, which also in their minds should have been a huge contradiction, because why would they bring this man to the Pharisees if they knew that the Pharisees wanted to kill him? And he just made a miracle right in front of them and healed one of them by putting the ear back on the head of the servant, like nothing happened. So imagine how crazy and how sad that they still captured him and took him to the Pharisees. So then the company of soldiers and the commander of the officers of the Yehudim seized Yahushua and bound him, and they led him away to Hanan first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now you see how they wrote here Caiaphas, but in reality, originally in Hebrew was the same as Kepha, which is the name that Yahushua gave Peter. Why? Because Yahushua was putting Peter as his true representative on earth, meaning as the true high priest of the earth, meaning earthly high priest, while Yahushua was the heavenly high priest. So the earthly one represents the heavenly one, right? So Peter would represent Yahushua. So he gave him the name of the high priest of the moment. Interestingly enough, that name meant stone, and Yahushua is the cornerstone. So he gave him that name to represent him and take the place of the other high priest on the earth. I hope that's clear. So, Kefa. And they led him away to Hanan first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, right? Kefa, once again, who was high priest that year. So the servant of the high priest wasn't able to understand, so he got his ear cut off by Kefa, the true earthly high priest, set up by Mashiach himself, the heavenly high priest. And that's why there was a man with that same name as the high priest that year. Now, Kefa, and I don't know how to say it so that nobody's confused, but Caiaphas was the one who gave counsel to the Yehudim that it was better that one man should die for the people. So since he was the high priest of that year, even though he didn't accept Mashiach through the free will that Yahweh gave him, he was used by Yahweh because of his position. So he would prophesy at times, like it was in this case, because he said, thinking that he was saying it from his own heart, he said that it was better if he would die than for all of them to die at the hand of the Romans for being seen as rebellious or something like that. So he said it's better if he dies than for all of us to die. Without knowing it, Yahweh was using him to prophesy that he had to die for the people. He had to die for Israel. So that's why John repeats it here. Now Caiaphas was the one who gave counsel to the Yahudim that it was better that one man should die for the people. And Shimon Kefa followed Yahushua with another third one, most likely John. And that third one was known to the high priest, and went with Yahushua into the courtyard of the high priest, right? So he had connections. He knew the high priest. So he was able to get into the courtyard with Peter. And you see, I say John because John would do this. Sometimes he would speak about himself as a disciple without saying that it was him. And he does say the name of Shimon. So he could have said the other name, but he doesn't. So most likely it was him. Now, other than that, could have been another one, doesn't matter. He does say the name of Shimon Kefa, doesn't say another name. So we see how Kefa works in this chapter in contrast to Caiaphas, right? The other Kefa, the high priest of that year. So, verse 16, but Kefa was standing outside at the door. So the other third one, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Kefa in. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Kefa, "Are you also one of these men's third ones?" He said, "I am not." Now it's interesting that the other disciple was able to enter because he was known by the high priest. He even goes back and talks to the woman who opens the door and tells her, "Let this other man enter." That woman doesn't ask John, "Are you one of that man's followers?" No, but she asks Peter. And it's interesting that not John, but Peter was the one who told Mashiach that he was willing to die with him. And Yahushua told him, "You will deny me 3 times." And this is when that starts. So it's interesting how since Peter spoke, he was tempted. The other disciple didn't say that. He didn't speak in that way. So he wasn't tempted in that way. That woman didn't ask him to see if he was a follower of Mashiach, but he asked Peter. I hope that's understood. So part of the fact that we must be careful about what we say with our mouth because it has a lot of power. The enemy hears and the enemy can tempt. So then the servant girl who kept the door said to Kepha, "Are you also one of these men's taught ones?" He said, "I am not." So that's the first denial. And the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there because it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Kepha was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest asked Yahushua about his taught ones and his teaching. Yahushua answered him, "I spoke openly to the world. I always taught I always taught in the congregation and in the set apart place where the Yehudim always meet, and I spoke no word in secret." Right? This is interesting because he's asking for the doctrine, and Yahushua, obviously he has all the authority in the world, but my point is that he doesn't answer directly what he's being asked, because what he was being asked was really, how could I put it, in a way dumb, because they were asking it just to see how they would find something bad in him to accuse him. They knew what he would speak about. They knew the doctrine he was teaching because he would always speak openly. So he actually says that instead of answering what he was being asked. And it is not disrespectful, it's just what it is. He is trying to make them think about it like, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in the congregation and in the set apart place where the Yehudim always meet, and I spoke no word in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me. Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. See, they know what I said. And when he had said this, one of the officers who stood by slapped Yahushua in the face, saying, "Do you answer the high priest this way?" So you see, like I said, Yahushua is not being disrespectful. He's just being clear. And he's saying something, even though it's not exactly what he was being asked. But it is because what they were asking, they already knew. So it is the way they are speaking is pretty much to, I repeat, trying to catch him in something to accuse him. So this other man that was right there, when he heard that, since Yahushua didn't answer exactly what they were asking for because they already knew it and he knew, so he's pretty much telling them, "Why do you ask me? You already know." In other words, right? I've been talking. Why do you come to capture me at night when you could have asked anybody who has heard me? So this other guy, right? He wants to please the high priest. So he slaps Yahushua, obviously not knowing what he's doing. Imagine. So, and when he had said this, one of the officers who stood by slapped Yahushua in the face, saying, "Do you answer the high priest this way?" He was actually slapping the true high priest, the highest priest of all, the heavenly priest. So imagine when he realizes that, or when he realized it. Yahushua answered him, "If I have spoken," you see, right? Yahushua himself is telling him, "But if I said something wrong or evil, then I understand the slap. But I didn't. I was just wondering why I'm being asked about something they know already." So, Yahushua answered him, if I have spoken evilly, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me?" Then Hanan sent him bound to the high priest, Caiaphas. And Shimon Kepha was standing and warming himself. Then they said to him, "Are you also one of his taught ones?" He denied it and said, "I am not." second time. Now, remember how Yahushua, when he was captured, he said twice, I am, I am. Now, Peter, who represents him, is not ready yet because he needs Mashiach to be resurrected to give him the spirit in order to represent him. So it's interesting how he says, I am not. I am not. And in fact, 3 times. So that's why Yahushua had to be dead 3 days, right? So he denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Kepha cut off. So this is even more interesting because, like I said, the woman that asked Peter first didn't ask the other disciple. Peter said that he was willing to die with Mashiach. The other disciple didn't. Right? So the enemy knew where to go and who to ask. Then the other guys ask him the same. He denies it. And now, for the 3rd time, as they say, regarding the 3rd time, right? And like I said, like Yahushua had prophesied that he would deny him 3 times. Now it is a family member, a relative of the one whose ear Kepha cut off. So if Kepha had not cut off that ear, perhaps the relative would not have said anything here, right? So in a way, he made it happen through his action by being led by emotion. First, by telling Mashiach, I'm willing to die with you, not actually being willing, not knowing what that meant, at least not yet. And then by cutting the ear of that servant. So one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Kepha cut off, said, did I not see you in the garden with him? Weren't you the one with the sword cutting off an ear? Then Kepha again denied it, and immediately a cock crowed. Remember that it is quite possible that this was not an actual animal, but a person who held that title in the temple, who was the one who would open the doors and then call everyone in. So when he denied Mashiach 3 times, Mashiach would have to go and die and remain dead for 3 days in order to restore the sin of those who came from Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. Yahushua also, remember, that is the first, well, the one who started everything again in a spiritual sense. Everything that happened already in the flesh would happen in the spiritual after Mashiach came. That's why he is the last Adam. So the fact that he denies 3 times and Yahushua was about to go and die as the first to come, and then the 2 witnesses would come. Those are 3 people who the people of Israel need to accept, to believe, and instead the world will reject them. So the denial of Mashiach 3 times connected to denying or rejecting the 3 messengers sent by Yahweh and Yahushua afterwards, because Yahweh sent Yahushua, Yahushua sent the last, Mikael, his messenger, to testify, and then he sends Eliyahu as his messenger, as his prophet, as we see in Exodus regarding Moshe and Aaron. So then Kepha again denied it, and immediately a cock crowed. So after he denies, a new day begins, right? It is good that is written that his mercies are renewed every morning, because he was going to be redeemed from that denial. Also, the doors of the temple are being opened so that he can repent, because now Mashiach is going to die, and that is going to open the door to the Father through the favor. So then they led Yahushua from Caiaphas to the palace, and it was early, and they themselves did not go into the palace, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Pesach. So this is another verse that I find amazing, showing how blind they were, because they are ready to kill the Messiah, whom they have rejected. And they are like, no, we cannot go in because we cannot be defiled by entering that place. And we need to go and celebrate Pesach, right? When they were about to kill Mashiach on Pesach, fulfilling Pesach, not knowing. So, and they led Yahushua from Caiaphas to the palace, and it was early, and they themselves did not go into the palace, lest they should be defiled. So you see how their minds were like really on another level of spiritual blindness, because they were defiled already to the fullest extent by not being able to recognize Mashiach. Yet they continue fulfilling commandments of men, thinking that entering a place would defile them, because they want to celebrate a feast that was about to be actually fulfilled by them, and thinking that they would celebrate the feast and would be acceptable to the Most High after having killed an innocent man, because they would kill him and then go celebrate. So, and they themselves did not go into the palace, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Pesach. Pilate therefore came out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" So Pilate therefore came out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Oh, and isn't it amazing that they are answering the same way? And even, well, this is actually disrespectful because of the way it's being said. But my point is that when the Pharisees, they knew already what Yahushua preached, they capture him as an evildoer during the middle of the night. They bring him to ask him something they already know. So he tells them, "But I always preach openly. Why do you ask me that? Ask anybody who heard me." They slap him. "Oh, you evildoer, why do you talk like that to the high priest?" Now they go to their authority when it comes to Rome, because they want them to kill Mashiach. So he asks simply as a judge, what did he do? And they don't answer what he did or what his crimes were. They actually say, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you," like saying, "Are you stupid? Why do you ask that? If we bring him, it's because he needs to die," right? That makes no sense. But they talk like that, even though they were accusing Mashiach of doing something similar. And I repeat, like just by reading the way Yahushua said things and the way they said them, you can see their attitude. And Yahushua was right about saying it. They were not, because they are bringing somebody to a judge who doesn't know anything about the case. He wants to know in order to judge. And they say that as if your word is enough to kill somebody. Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law," right? And that's a good answer, right? Because they're not addressing him as they should. So he just tells them, then just you take him and you judge him. Is you and your people and your law, whatever. You take him and judge him according to your law. However, the Yahudim wanted to kill Mashiach, and that authority had been taken from them when Yahushua was a child, around the time when he was like 10 years old. The authority for the Yahudim to execute somebody according to the Torah was taken by Rome. So since they wanted to kill Mashiach, they had to go to Rome. But Pilate didn't think it was a matter of death, so he tells them, you judge him. Then, as he says here, the Yahudim said to him, it is not right for us to put anyone to death. Right? What it means is that they didn't have the right to put anyone to death, because they wanted to put him to death. And in the law, you see that there are people who is right in the sense of just for them to be put to death. So then Pilate said to them, you take him and judge him according to your law. The Yehudim said to him, it is not right for us to put anyone to death, in order that the word of Yahushua might be filled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he was about to die. This is also interesting. You see here that it says, and if a man, this is Deuteronomy 21, 22, and 23. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, that is key, because Yahushua never committed a sin. The sentence were written stone. That's why stones was a method to execute the law. As I was saying, the Yahudim were to execute a person who sinned against the commandments of Yahweh with stones. People would be stoned. So, like stoned to death, as it happened with Stephen, right? So it's interesting that even though Mashiach would come to the Yahudim and they would reject him, we don't see that when he's killed, he is stoned to death. Instead, he is sacrificed on a cross, which was a method of the Romans. So it's interesting that we see that the Yahudim lost the authority to execute someone to death, so they had to go to Rome. So if they went to Rome, the Romans would execute him. And since he was a Gentile to them, I mean, since he was not a Roman, but someone from another nation, an stranger or a I just forgot the word, but foreigner, then they would execute him in that way, that very painful way. And obviously, the Yehudim wanted Mashiach to go through a lot of pain. They wanted to cause him pain. So that way in which Romans would do it was the one they chose. They wanted to do it that way. And it was the only way for them to be able to get rid of him in that sense of killing him. So it is amazing that the way the Yahudim would kill was with stones. And it was the Romans who would sacrifice people on a cross, a wooden cross. And Yahushua comes in the time when the Roman Empire is ruling over the earth. And it was prophesied in the book of Numbers, meaning the Torah, when the Yahudim were talking against Yahweh and against Moshe, that Yahweh sent serpents that would bite them and put their poison in them. So when they repented, Moshe prayed to Yahweh, and Yahweh told him to build a serpent and put it on a pole. And that was to represent that Yahushua would be killed on a wooden beam, and through being killed on a wooden beam or cross, he would kill the serpent. Remember that Mashiach is the same numerical value as Nahash, serpent. So when Mashiach was killed, through that action, he was actually killing the serpent. But not only that, we see here in Deuteronomy that it says, and if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, as they are thinking that he did, and he be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree. So we see a law in the Torah regarding someone being hanged on wood, on a tree, because in Hebrew, wood or tree, the same word in Hebrew, etz. So being hanged on a cross made of wood would be equivalent to being hanged on a tree. Right? So also in a way, that's why many black people who were from the tribe of Yehuda, and perhaps others, but it is said that mainly Yehuda, when they went through slavery, were also killed and hung from trees. So, and thou hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree. Hey, what's up, Ricardo? So his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. So that's why they sacrificed him on a cross made of wood. And then before the evening came, they took him from the tree, from the cross, to bury him. For he that is hanged is a curse of Elohim. So that's why it is written also that Yahushua became a curse so that we would receive the blessing. He was seen as someone who is cursed by Elohim because of the way they decided to kill him. That thy land be not defiled. It's interesting because it is like saying that through the death of Mashiach on the tree, the land, the earth was purified. But let me go. So, in order that the word of Yahushua might be filled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he was about to die, because he had spoken to the disciples and told them about the serpent on the pole that Moshe made in the desert, and said that he would have to be also raised up like the serpent was. So he was referring to being killed like the Romans would kill evildoers. Then Pilate went back into the palace and called Yahushua and said to him, "Are you the sovereign of the Yahudim?" Now that is amazing. Well, what's coming even more? Because Pilate could have asked a bunch of things like, "What do you do?" Why? Some of the things that he's going to ask also later. But the first question that he asks, "Are you the sovereign of the Yahudim?" And I find this very respectful coming from Pilate as a leader. He's actually given him the chance to speak and say who he is. And he is even willing to believe that he is the sovereign of the Yahudim, and that's why they are bringing him, because he knew how the Yahudim were regarding their own people. So, are you the sovereign of the Yahudim? Yahushua answered him, "Do you say this from yourself, or did others talk to you about me?" Right? That is important, because if you say this from yourself, then I could reveal something to you that is being revealed already. But if somebody else told you, then I should not, because you don't know what you're saying. All right. So, do you say this from yourself, or did others talk to you about me? Pilate answered, "Am I a Yahudi?" Right? Don't get mad, Pilate. Hold on. Pilate answered, "Am I a Yahudi? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What did you do?" Right? So, since he asked, "Are you the sovereign of the Yahudim? Do you say this from yourself?" He's like, "Why would I say it from myself? I don't care if you're the king of the Yahudim. I'm not a Yahudi." That's what Pilate pretty much saying, right? So he knew the fame that he had and the fact that it was the Yahudim, his own people, that brought him to Pilate. "Am I Yahudi? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What did you do?" Yahushua answered, "My reign is not of this world." Right? So he answered the first question and the second with the same answer, right? "My reign is not of this world." So he's saying, yes, I am the king. By saying not of this world, he's pretty much saying, and not just of the Yahudim, of the whole reality. the entire existence. And also at the same time saying that the world is still under the rule of the false Elohim, right? The false mighty one. Because he says, my reign is not of this world. But he's coming to defeat the king of this world, the mighty one of this world, as represented by when Kefa cut the ear of the man named Melech, meaning king, right? You see, this is what he cut off from the servant, Ozen, ear. And this is the first letter, Aleph, which represents Yahushua as the first stone, just like Peter represents that stone, cornerstone, Peter meaning stone. Then this is a sword, interestingly enough. So he who represents the first took the sword and made the ear fall. Isn't that interesting? The noon represents fall, something falling, as the ear fell. The aleph is also the head of the head of an ox, right? Because the reish is the actual head of a person, but this is the head of an ox. So it represents head, it represents leadership, represents strength. So from the head, the ear was cut off with the sword and fell. Ozen. So go back. So oh well, and basically the main reason why I wanted to see it, since it represents the power, the authority, or the reign being taken from the enemy, the king of this world, that which Peter did with the servant. So just like Peter was a servant of Yahushua, the high priest, Peter cut off the ear of the servant of the earthly high priest. So the servant of Yahushua, Peter, represents Yahushua. The servant of the high priest would represent the high priest. However, his name was Melech, so represents him who comes as a Melech. My point is, Yahushua is the first, the last would be he who becomes a Melech, right? In the heavens, the enemy obviously wanted to make a copy of Yahushua, which is the one known as the Antichrist, and a copy of the last, who would be the one known as the beast. Interestingly enough, in Christianity, they think they are the one and the same. However, they are two different entities. Just like with the first and the last, they think they are one and the same. However, they are two different people, first and last. So now with all that said, we could see that the leadership, the authority, would be cut off from the fallen. So that's why the ear was cut off, because he represented that through the authority of Yahushua, the sword of Yahweh, the authority of Baal, the golden calf, as a head, would be cut off and would fall. Remember also that Yahushua said that the head of prophecy, which was Halel, and this is a head of an ox, like the calf, the golden calf, the head of prophecy would be cut off with John the Baptist. So here we have a representation through the word for ear. And Halel was supposed to hear Yahweh and fulfill his commandment, fulfill his orders. So he rebelled, and therefore he was cut off as working as an ear. So now going back. My reign is not of this world. If my reign were of this world, my servants would fight so that I would not be delivered to the Yahudim. But now my reign is not from here. So sadly, because of this and because of the falsehood in the world regarding how this world is, the space and all of that, some have interpreted that Yahushua is an alien because he is not of the world, right? So they think he's from another world, from another planet, as they would say. And in fact, we could say he's from another world, but in the sense of reality, dimension, not in the sense of planet or another ball in the middle of infinite space or whatever. So Yahushua, like I said, he comes from the Father. He is from a reality that is above this world, beyond this world, in the sense that he is from the eternal realm, while this world is the temporal realm. And that's why he's saying, my reign is not of this world. If my reign were of this world, so we see that first, like I said, he is telling him, yes, I am king, right? And second, because Pilate said, your nation, your own nation, and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What did you do? So Yahushua is trying to tell him, yeah, my reign is not of this world, because if it were, they would not have been able to do that they just did, and you would be in trouble. So my reign is not of this world. If my reign were of this world, my servants would fight. That shows that the angels that mainly work in this reality are serving someone else, right? Which is that third of the angels that serve Halel. In a way, reason why when Yahushua was going with the disciples crossing the sea on a boat, there was a storm and the boat was about to flip and the disciples thought they were going to die. Why would nature itself try to stop Mashiach from going where he was going, right? If he is the creator, the creation should actually be like take care of him, right? However, their creation itself, nature was trying to destroy the boat until he spoke, and nature had to listen, right? As a pet would listen to its master, for instance. So my reign is not of this world. If my reign were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Yahudim. But now my reign is not from here. Then Pilate said to him, you are a sovereign. You are a sovereign then, right? So he received the answer for the first. I repeat, then Pilate said to him, you are a sovereign then. Yahushua answered, you say it, because I am a sovereign. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Now that's beautiful, right? But it's interesting that, like I said, John writes to represent the coming of the last. Remember that Yahushua is the truth. He said, I am the truth. Now he says, I bear witness to the truth. So it is like the last who comes as a witness, the witness like Moshe, to testify of Yahushua, who is the truth, right? So you say it because I am a sovereign. So Yahushua is pretty much saying, you are saying it right now because it is true. That's why Yahweh made it so that you would say it even if you don't believe it or understand it. You say it because I am a sovereign. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world. Now, sovereign, you see how he was saying, my reign is not of this world, right? So the word reign, as you can see, which means kingdom, is right here as well, right? Reign, right? So there's the reign, the kingdom. And this sovereign comes from super, which is something above, over, like supernatural. So it means he is above all kingdoms. He is above, and actually reign is also from ring. That's why the king has a ring to seal, like Yahweh promised Zerubbabel. So sovereign actually means the super reign, meaning the one with all authority. And that's why also what they do in the movie, The Lord of the Rings, right? The ring to rule them all, if I'm not mistaken, they would say, right? That was to be sovereign. Yeah, I think that's what they would say. Precious. So then Pilate said to him, "You are a sovereign." Then Yahushua said, "You say it, because I am a sovereign. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." You see, confirming that it's also referring to the second manifestation as a witness, as the voice, to testify of Yahushua as the truth. So everyone who is of the truth, the chosen few of the end times, the 144,000 who belong to Yahushua, will hear the voice of the good shepherd and follow. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. That's interesting, because his own people were rejecting him and trying to kill him. And here Pilate is actually coming around, who was a Gentile, a Roman. He is like actually thinking about it. Like, he does sound like a king, right? He seems like he's saying something deep, right? And then, as we know, his wife is gonna come and tell him, don't have anything to do with him, because she had a dream. So Yahweh was actually revealing himself to them. And that's why he washed his hands, to fulfill part um of the ritual done for Pesach before killing the lamb, but also to represent that he had nothing to do, because he actually believed that he was the king of the Yahudim. So he was doing it because they wanted it, not because he thought it was right, or that it was what needed to happen. So Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" I love this as well, because Pilate is the leader, and he's asking, what is truth? Just like nowadays, and it's amazing, because Yahushua said, "I am the truth, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And we all know what truth is really, but the world is a lie. So they have created this illusion that everyone has their own truth. And that's pretty much really referring to opinions or perspectives. But the truth is only one. Your perspective may be wrong. Your opinion, most likely, well, not yours, but most people's opinions are wrong, right? So here he's asking, what is truth? Like I said, people nowadays say, what is your truth? So people, like a man may say that he is a woman, right? And people have to believe that, when it is a lie, complete lie. So Pilate said to him, what is truth? Because he has said, everyone who is of the truth. So Pilate is asking, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Yahudim. So in a way, it's like he actually wasn't asking to receive a question. He was kind of like saying that is something unknowable, right? Like, what is truth? Whatever. And he left, right? Um, like if truth was something subjective, when it's not, right? Something objective is something concrete. So what is truth? And when he said this, he went out again to the Yehudim and said to them, I find no guilt in him. This is very important, because there were two feasts that are being fulfilled here in a way. In the literal sense, Pesach, because Yahushua came as the lamb, not literal, obviously, but that to fulfill literal in the sense that it was on that day. But there were also certain things that happened as a fulfillment of the feast of Yom Kippur. So pretty much the feast of Yom Kippur the half of it was fulfilled with Mashiach as the male goat. Both on Pesach and on Yom Kippur, the priest or high priest would have to check the sacrifice. Now, also Pesach, for instance, in Egypt, was sent to every household because every person needs to believe in Yahushua, the Lamb. So the sacrifice of the lamb was done by every family, right? Now, when it comes to the Feast of Yom Kippur, which was given after the Exodus, because it represents what we will fulfill in the end times, that sacrifice was in the temple, and the high priest had to check the two male goats that they would bring to him. Obviously, the sacrifice of Pesach was also done, but I was just mentioning the difference between the way Pesach started in Egypt. All households needed to sacrifice a lamb because all people need to believe in Yahushua no matter where they are, physically or spiritually. And Yom Kippur was given later on because it represents what we'll fulfill in the end times. Now, Yahushua came as the lamb and as the male goat. The high priest needed to check the animal that was going to be sacrificed to see that it was perfect, that it had no imperfection, pretty much nothing wrong with it. So that if it would find an imperfection of any kind on the animal, then that animal would not be able to be sacrificed. Now, there was a time when they would be so rebellious that they would sacrifice whatever, but finding an imperfection on the animal would disqualify that animal as a sacrifice for Yahweh, because that imperfection would represent a sin. So when Yahushua was brought to Pilate, they are seeing Pilate as the authority, just like the high priest was the authority in the temple over the Yehudim. So when they bring to Pilate, Pilate is acting as the priest, seeing the lamb, checking the lamb. That's why he's asking questions to Mashiach. And he says, I find no guilt in him. That is like the priest saying, I find no imperfection in him. He is perfect for the sacrifice. He is the perfect lamb for the sacrifice. But you have a habit that I shall release someone to you at the Pesach. Now, the habit was actually to release someone during a feast. Now, they are celebrating Pesach. So he's saying, well, we're about to celebrate Pesach. And this shows how Pilate actually wanted to release Mashiach. Because he says, well, I normally let someone go from the Yahudim, from jail, during their feasts. So I will use that to release Yahushua. So he gives them that possibility, reminds them that he would release a prisoner. So it says, but you have a habit that I shall release someone to you at the Pesach. Do you wish then that I release to you the sovereign of the Yahudim? So, oh, Pilate, why would he do that? Right, I repeat, he wanted to release Mashiach, but he didn't necessarily want to be, I don't know how to put it, but like nice to the Yahudim because of how they were, because they were rejecting their own king. So he says, do you wish then that I release to you the sovereign of the Yahudim? So imagine to them, like, what are you saying, Pilate? Why would you say that? Of course we don't. So I'm pretty sure that didn't help. But that shows that Pilate actually recognized him as the king, the sovereign of the Yahudim, as the one who had all authority. Okay, so this is also interesting, as I was saying, because part of the feast of Yom Kippur was fulfilled on Pesach during this time, during the first manifestation of Yahushua. in Leviticus 16, we have the ritual for Yom Kippur. I'm not going to read the whole thing, even though the whole thing is very interesting. So it says, and from the congregation of the children of Israel, so the whole of the people, the nation, he takes two male goats as a sin offering. Yahushua is about to pay for our sins. And one ram as an ascending offering. That ram was Eliyahu pretty much in 2,000 years ago, John the Baptist. But Yahushua is one of these two male goats. So then he says, and Aharon shall bring the bull. That bull is the last. So the bull and the ram are the two witnesses that need to be sacrificed at the end of time. The two male goats already came, or that part was fulfilled already, and we're about to see that. So it says, Aaron shall bring the bull as a sin offering. So the bull, the sacrifice of the last, is also a sin offering, but it is for himself. Yahushua doesn't need a payment for sacrifices because he never sinned. But the last comes as the prodigal son. So in a way, he dies for himself, as in to rectify what he did as a prodigal son, and to make atonement for himself and for his house, meaning for the 144,000. So the male goat was for the people of Israel, the nation. The bull was for the house of the high priest. And when it comes to the house of Yahushua, the high priest, according to the order of Melchizedek, that is the 144,000. They are the house, they are the temple of Yahweh, right? So the last dies for the 144,000 because Yahushua died for the inward and the last for outward, meaning Yahushua came and died for the soul, the last dies for their bodies. So now the chosen few who receive and accept the first and last don't have to die to enter the kingdom. So we see that both the male goat and the bull were for a sin offering, but for different parts of the people of Israel. One for the nation and the other for the priests. Then it says, and he shall take the two goats and let them stand before Yahweh at the door of the tent of appointment, just like there were two men standing by Pilate. And Aharon shall cast lots for the two goats, like Pilate just said, do you want me to release Mashiach? I mean the king, the sovereign of the Yahudim. And Aharon shall cast lots for the two goats, one lot for Yahweh, and the other lot for Azazel. Azazel is the fallen angel that came down in the time of Noah, and it is the one who is in the bottomless pit, who is going to come out as Abaddon, the destroyer, the abomination of desolation, during the fifth trumpet. So we see by name Azazel here. One male goat was for Azazel, the other male goat for Yahweh. And Aharon shall bring the goat on which the Lord of Yahweh fell, and shall prepare it as a sin offering, just like Yahushua will be prepared as a sin offering. But the goat on which the Lord for Azazel fell is caused to stand alive before Yahweh to make atonement upon it, to send it into the wilderness to Azazel. Now, so the other for Azazel was left alive. Now here it says atonement. Atonement in Hebrew is from the verb kafar, which is to cover. So here, which some misunderstand, is not that the goat for Azazel atones for us or pays for us. No, it is that the sins that Yahushua paid for, the guilt for those sins covers Azazel. He is the one who has to take the guilt. That's why the sins were put over the goat for Azazel, and then he was left in the desert to go to Azazel with the guilt. That's why it was sent to the wilderness to Azazel. All right. So 2 male goats, they would throw lots, and one would be sacrificed for a sin offering to Yahweh, and the other one was sent to Azazel, covered with all the sins of the people. Now we see here that it says, "But you have a habit that I shall release someone like the goat of Azazel to you at the Pesach. Do you wish then that I release to you the sovereign of the Yahudim?" Then they all shouted again, saying, "Not this one, but Barabbas." And Barabbas was a robber. Barabbas was a thief, just like the enemy wants to steal the honor of Yahweh. Just like Azazel stole information from the heavens and taught it to the humans, and sin multiplied. So Barabbas represents Azazel. So there were 2 goats here, 2 male goats. Yahushua, the goat that was sacrificed for a sin offering to Yahweh, and Barabbas, the goat that was freed and sent to the desert for Azazel. The 2 goats needed to look similar. It's interesting that Barabbas, this is from the Greek, son of a father. Bar, as you can see, is son, right? And Abba is father. So Bar Abba means the son of the father, right? So like you just saw in the concordance, Bar is son, and Abba or Abba, oh, you see, Abba. Bar Abba. You see how there says father, well, not there. So Bar Abba would be son of the Father. And as we know, Yahushua is the son of the Father Almighty, son of the Heavenly Father. So we had the son of the Father and the son of a father, that other father being Satan. So the 2 male goats presented before the Yahudim. Pilate threw lots in the sense of asking the people, "Who you guys want me to free?" And they asked for Barabbas, the son of a father, meaning Azazel, the male goat of Azazel from Leviticus 16, who represents the false Messiah, who claims to be the son of the Father. So that's how the chapter ends.